Welcome to Meditations, a Stoic podcast, a 12-episode limited series exploring the writing of Marcus Aurelius. Through this work, we will examine the philosophy of Stoicism, how it applied to the life of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, and how it applies to our own lives today. Hey, it's the last episode today, guys. We have completed chapter 12 of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and I'm here. I'm Jared. Over here, I have another aspiring philosopher and historian.
I'm Devin. It's good to be here.
Are you feeling ready, Devin? Are you feeling ready to dig into chapter 12 here?
Oh, extremely ready. I did a lot of preparation because this being the last one, I wanted it to be a good one. So I got lots here that I can either say or not say, depending on how things go. And so it's going to be a good day. Whenever we start these, I have this instinct to say good morning, but it might not be morning wherever the listener is. So
I think without exception, we've recorded all of these in the morning, so that probably accounts for any tiredness in our voice that you guys have heard. But you know what? We're going to try to bring the energy today, and I'm pretty excited. This is like the last day of school in a way, you know? This is like the final exam, so...
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
Like, I love doing this with you, but, this one's been a really long ride. Like, before this, all we'd ever done was, I think, 3 episodes as a max.
That's true.
If I'm not mistaken. So, like, doing 12, when you told me it was going to take us into the fall, I was like, that's crazy. You're crazy, Jared. And then, things kept happening. I got sick. You got sick.
Yeah.
Forgotten plans, things like that. And so it really did end up dragging into the fall. You were completely right in your estimation of how long it would take us.
Yeah, man. And just wait until we get into our next podcast, Shorecast, where we watch every episode of Jersey Shore.
Oh, I love it. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah. So look forward to that.
We can do like live react sort of thing.
Deeply philosophical.
Yeah. There's a lot there, especially politically.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hate the word ado. So without any further bullshitting, let's get into this. We are here. It's chapter 12 time. If I could distill this chapter down, I would say that probably the best way to do that would be a very simple phrase. And I'm excited to hear Devin's thoughts on this phrase. I think I know what he's going to say. What do you make of this idea, Devin? We are all one.
Well, as far as it being the distillation of the chapter, maybe this is a difference in translation, but I would kind of disagree. When I was reading the chapter, the kind of central message that I kept reading out of it was more along the lines of like that very central kind of message of like be happy with who you are, where you are, and with what you have, and you'll always be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a difference in translation. I don't know, but that was more how this last chapter seemed to me.
Yeah, for sure. That idea
and I think
of like
you
perception.
mentioned that specific. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the idea of like perception and that like how you perceive things is like paramount.
Yeah, and I mean you even mentioned a specific section 4. When I read mine, you kind of summed it up as citizen of the world.
Mm-hmm. That's in book 4, by the way. That's like an older.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. So then I was reading the wrong thing. I was reading section 4 from book 12. So I misunderstood you there. That's my bad.
Yeah, I brought up that one, book 4, section 4. I think that this idea is really interesting. Comes from a previous chapter, but I do think that it's worth talking about. Pretty cool that even, in Roman times, with like the Roman Empire being what it was, Marcus Aurelius still kind of came across this idea of, what is like, if you are a citizen of anything, what is like the ultimate unit of that? And the idea that he's a citizen of the world, right? Thinking about that as opposed to, just a citizen of Rome. I think that's pretty cool that people at that time were coming to that conclusion.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would have necessarily always had the same idea of it that we do, of what that means. I'm we can't really look at all at Rome's history and get the misconception that they had this idea of being one with the rest of the world in some kind of peaceful way, because that's clearly not the case.
Yeah, for sure. That's we'll definitely get into that like later on in the episode, kind of the gap between like theory and practice. But yeah, I still really like this idea, and I kind of considered it a modern idea, right? And it's something that we've talked about in previous podcasts that we've done together. I mean, outside of this series, right? The Apollo missions, and the idea that once people got into space, they looked back on the Earth and started to see not nations, but one united humanity, right? And I had kind of figured that this idea is something new, like the idea of like the United Nations and this sort of organization that emerges out of like World War II and that kind of thing, right? But yeah, I just think it is very cool that people were arriving at this like long before that, and kind of what they were basing it on is interesting to me.
Do you know the etymology of the phrase "citizen of the world"? I'm gonna look it up right now because it's made me curious.
Okay, you can look that up. We'll wait. Yeah, I just think that I mean, it is like a platitude, I guess. Like that's kind of the criticism that I expected to get from you, right? It's like not a super meaningful idea, but to me it is, and yeah.
It's a super subjective idea, which means that in the right hands, it's a super meaningful idea, and in the wrong hands, it's just another tool for control, right? But it's also, it's pretty vague what it is and what it means. The Greeks wouldn't have said citizen of the world; they would have said cosmopolitan.
Okay. Did you get that?
But that's basically what it came down to, and that in their concept, it would have been a lot more tied to their city than to the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but just different for them than it is for us. That's all. Anyways.
Yeah, cool. Anyways, that's about as good as an explanation of that. Do you want to move to the next part here?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
So it's all in how you perceive it. This idea that you're in control of your kind of perceptions and misconceptions and your reactions to the world, right?
Yeah, for sure. This one definitely rings true to me. Like and it's something that we've talked about quite a bit. Like a indifference to external events, almost. Like when something happens in your life, and this happens over and over again in anyone's life, there's circumstances that come up that provoke you, make you upset, whether that's a situation or a person, and it's important to remember at all times you can just decide to be happy. You can decide to not care about it, right? You can decide to have a positive mindset. That it's a control that is always yours, that people relinquish all of the time. But it's important to remember that you can always fall back on that, right? You can have complete and total calm in your own mind at any time.
I think for me, that's going to be always something that I'm trying to do, but never really succeeding at.
It's something that I exceed at occasionally.
It's definitely not like an easily achievable thing.
Yeah, luckily it's something that life will, like, no matter what, even if you screw that up a couple of times, like life will continually give you opportunities to try again, right? There'll always be something that happens like in your life. Yeah. Okay, how about this idea? So this is one that I think that we can maybe discuss a bit, debate on a bit. The idea of blamelessness, right? The idea that no one is to blame. The gods aren't to blame. Humans aren't to blame. So this idea, here in section 12, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't believe in gods, so I mean, we're in alignment there that they're not to blame for anything.
I mean, Kate, replace God with like the universe or whatever if you want to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, everything is a matter of consequence, right? So, I mean, there's really no outside force that needs to be blamed for anything.
Sure. Yeah,
everything's action and consequence. So it either comes down to, you're either willing to blame people for their shit or you're not.
Yeah, I've definitely come across this in my own life, like quite a few times when, certain things happen. I think that it is tempting to try to find something to blame, right? And it kind of makes you, it's almost like a similar thing that happens just with like the emotion of anger or something like that. Like it makes you feel better to have someone to blame type of thing, right? But does it really? I think that's the real question. Like, does it really make you feel better if you have someone to blame?
I don't know, like this sort of thing must kind of happen in degrees, right? Like, if somebody murdered somebody you love, well, then, having a specific person to blame for it might help you get some closure. I don't know. It's not ever happened to me, but I'm just saying in some cases, there's a reason. There's a reason the criminal justice system operates the way it does in terms of victims, right? And so, like, having that person to kind of, like, to direct those feelings at, it must be part of the process. I can't imagine that it's insignificant in terms of something like that, but I don't know.
Sure, yeah, but also
maybe
like,
there really are situations where having a person to blame matters.
Maybe, I don't know. That is the basis of our criminal justice system, which is like, I think, like, obviously we're not going to debate that at length, but it is incredibly flawed and prejudiced against certain groups, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But this is more on like a personal level, I think, than that, right? And just the idea that like, really, like, when, to tie it back to that whole thing of like, you can't get mad at a fig tree for growing figs, right? You can't get mad at a selfish person for being selfish. You can't get mad at a jealous person for being jealous, right? Realizing that like when people do things that hurt you, that it's just like part of their essential nature, right? And that you can't really, like, you're not really going to make yourself feel better about it if you're just constantly looking for people to blame. Like, that's not actually a path to peace of mind in any way.
Probably not. No.
Yeah.
Look, I think that's a pretty simplistic take on it, but yeah, basically.
Oh, it works for me, man.
I'm accepting that statement as it is.
I mean, there's plenty of frustrating people in my life, and if I'm able to just, like, I can stay mad at them forever, or I could just, like, members of my family, whatever the hell, right? Or I can just say, that's their nature, that's who they are. I don't have any control over that. The only thing that I have control over is how I act, the way that I take care of my family, what I choose to do with my time, right? I can't really control how other people choose to interact with the world, basically, right?
And I mean, that's like a useful way to choose to interact with the situation, but I mean, you do have to resolve the feelings at some point, somehow.
I think that you can resolve them just by saying just that. Like, how does that not resolve them? Just say, that's who the person is, and I can't change that. Resolved.
I don't know. Maybe that just doesn't work for me.
Maybe not, but what would work for you then?
Beats the shit out of me. I don't know. I'm angry all the time.
Well, that's kind of the lesson of this chapter, and the lesson of Stoicism is I mean, sure, if that's something that you want to do is be angry, but realize that you can let that go at any time, and it's not really it's not a process even necessarily. You could do it in a moment, right? I think that's what Marcus Aurelius is telling us here.
I understand that's what he's trying to say. Yeah. I don't think he realizes that that's just not a thing for some people.
It's not how everyone functions, right? It definitely is, like you said, work in progress. Maybe that's like the ideal, but
Yeah, I mean, I would say like it's so like it's a really flawed system, um, with really great intent.
I mean, says you.
Man, like Marcus Aurelius was one of the last Stoics, and there's been no Stoic philosophers or like serious practitioners since like 300 or 400 AD. So I think history is spoken on that one.
I mean, maybe not like as famous, but there's still like some big names in Stoicism. I don't know. Ryan Holiday is one that comes to mind, but
Okay.
anyways, yeah, we'll move on here though. See what you think about this idea here. The idea of being a boxer, not a fencer, that analogy, right? So that when it's coming to your mindset and the mental tools that you have at your disposal, right? The fencer's weapon is picked up and put back down. The boxer's weapon is a part of him, right? Training your mind in such a way that you always have with you the tools that you need. You always have them at your disposal. I don't know what like being a fencer, what in terms of like mentally speaking, what would that really be? I don't know. Maybe that's like someone who like really needs to smoke weed all the time to be calm when you should just be calm in your mind. Maybe something like that, right? Not relying on like a crutch or something like that. I feel like I'm being called out
for my shit.
No, it's all good.
So that I don't disagree with that read on it, but that wasn't necessarily my read on it. Okay. I didn't look too much into the fencer analogy, but what I took from this was be good at what you are and using what you have, not something else. You know what I mean? Adapt to using the tools that you have available to you. That's kind of what I took from that.
Yeah, and maybe going back to that thing of like an early concept that kind of stumped us at first, and I think like the more that we read through this, the more that I understand it. Discard your thirst for books, right? We read that in maybe like chapter 1 or chapter 2, and we were like, well, what the fuck does he mean by that, right? Maybe
if we'd listened to him, we would have just thrown the books out then.
Yeah, the first chapter did. Okay. Throw this in the fire. Yeah, the idea with philosophy, right? That you and especially Stoic philosophy, that you should embody that, right? That that philosophy should become part of you, so that you shouldn't need that copy of Epictetus on hand to act in a Stoic way at all times, right? Or when you need to. It should just be like part of your psyche. It should be part of who you are. I think that's what is really meant here, at least to my reading.
Would you define Stoicism as like a form of positive nihilism? There's a lot of like, well, everything is what it is. It's out of your control. Don't blame it for what it is.
Yeah.
Just take meaning in what you've got and move on. Like it's if it's not positive nihilism, it's damn close.
It's close. But it does have that kind of essentialism to it, right? Where there is like a pure, like perfect state of things.
Oh, that's fair. It's much closer to Christianity, actually.
In some ways, it definitely is against Christianity in a lot of different ways. Maybe even like incompatible with Christianity in some ways. But yeah, I guess
interestingly enough, when Christianity gained power before they got rid of Stoicism, they were like, oh, these are a bunch of nice ideas, and they took them and worked them all into Christianity. Well, and then they were like, but Stoicism's pagan philosophy. Get out of here.
Yeah, that tends to be how Christianity kind of did things, right? Christianity...
They're big on syncretism, yeah.
Yeah, well, they just wanted to get everybody into their religion, so an easy way to do that was to borrow from religions that people were already into. Not that Stoicism is necessarily a religion, right? It's more of a philosophy.
At the time, philosophies existed like as an alternative to religion. Mm-hmm. Philosophy wasn't like now where people just kind of go to school and then study it and write books and hope they make money off of it. Back then, like,
right,
it was like joining a religion to join Stoicism. It was an alternative to it.
Sure. Yeah. I would say like positive nihilism is more like there is no inherent meaning in the universe. You decide what it is for yourself. I think that Stoicism is closer to like that Platonic essentialism that we spoke about before, right? Where it's like there is a pure, like the pure perfect Devon exists as a concept, like in the kind of texture or whatever, the like mesh of the universe, and like you should try to live up to that or something. It's closer to that than it is to not nihilism, I think.
That to me mixes weirdly with like everybody is who they are and you can't blame them for it. It's like that weird mix of like, hey, there's a perfect version of you and you should try to be that perfect version, and also like other people are garbage and you can't blame them for being garbage.
Yeah.
Like it's an odd mix.
Yeah, it's something to think about anyway, something to digest,
For sure. I mean, this was never meant to be published.
True. Yeah. But it's meant to be, now it is meant to be discussed, meant to be dissected.
Digested.
You can get quite a bit out of it. What do you make of this idea right here? So that you can have everything right now in terms of like tranquility in that, right? Everything you're trying to reach by taking the long way around. This is literally in the very first section of this chapter. You could have right now at this moment if you'd stop thwarting your own attempts, right? And I think it ties in well with, I believe it's the first section of chapter 11. This idea that like you should try to live in a way that if you just like died right now, that it's not like the narrative of your life or whatever would be incomplete, right? You shouldn't live in this way where you're constantly like aiming for something that you haven't achieved. You should try to live in a way that you just are that, right? Like you're the human being who you are is kind of like that accomplishment that you're trying to achieve. I think is like the best way that I can kind of explain this, or this idea that you could have it right now, like a tranquil mindset, or you're living up to your potential, right? You can't just say, oh, I'm living up to my potential. You just decide that you are, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, if we're talking about, like, I think this is one of those, like, lower your standards kind of things. Like, you can be happy if you just decide that, everything you want is just right where you are now, sort of thing. That's what it seems like, Mm-hmm. Don't want too much and don't have too lofty of ideas or dreams, and just be happy with wherever you are and whatever you're doing.
Right. Yeah. That comes through strongly like in Epictetus, that you don't achieve happiness by getting more. You achieve happiness by wanting less.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's easy for a former slave to say.
Yeah, I guess so, right? Yeah. Something revealing about being a slave. Yeah, for sure. I don't know. Yeah, any type of bullshit that you go through in life, I guess, can reveal something to you about how to live.
But yeah, I think this is a useful like emotional tool. You know what I mean? If things aren't good and you're not happy, well then lower your expectations.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, if happiness really is like the goal in that, right? Or to not put so many conditions on your happiness or your self-worth, right? Like I feel myself doing this sometimes, like all the time. Being like,
I just feel like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus are trying to gaslight us.
Maybe, dude. Yeah, they might be.
I'm just messing around.
From the past. Just like that, putting this concept on yourself, like putting these expectations on yourself. I will feel worthy when I do X, or I will be happy when I have X, right? Not putting those conditions on, just saying, no, I'm happy now. Like with the present situation, I can be happy with that. And just all it takes is changing your mind, right? Which is something that you always have power over. I think that really is like we've talked about this quite a bit, like that you want to feel powerful, right? And how can you feel that power? Well, that power is always within you, because you always have the power to just decide to be happy or decide to feel a sense of fulfillment, right?
I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that learning to do it is a journey if you don't just know how. But yeah, it seems like a really worthy thing to strive for.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And good to constantly like remind yourself of that, right? Because I think that like we do get this misperception where like there's external events and then our reaction is like it's like a 1-to-1. It like the external event implies the reaction, right? Which isn't necessarily true. And kind of takes away a lot of your freedom if you try
agency.
to live like that. Yeah, for sure. Which is pretty important. So I want to leave quite a bit of time for our big discussion at the end. We will get into the question of whether or not Marcus Aurelius is worthy of being called a philosopher. But before we get into that, we always like to do a little section here where we try to apply some of these lessons to our own lives. So we'll dig into that a little bit if you're cool with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. Okay. So do you want to go through some of these? Do you want to grab the first one?
Yeah, sure. Do you put conditions on your happiness and why? You know, conditions on happiness for me are less about like saying I'm going to achieve X.
Mm-hmm.
Or have X object, and they're more like lines in the sand. Mm-hmm. They're like, if my life gets any crappier than this, I've had enough. That's it. I'm freaking done.
Okay. Kind of the like putting those like measurements up in the opposite direction, I guess. Yeah, that's another way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that like the way that reality works is unpredictable, and there's always like contingencies, and there's always like unintended consequences, right? This idea that you never actually know what is good news and bad, right? You just kind of think that
Isn't that the truth?
So when you put these conditions on your happiness, or you know, this idea that like, oh, once I have like a big house, or once I have a super hot girlfriend, I'll be happy, right? But you know, what if that house has rats in it? Or what if that like girlfriend is like completely crazy, or whatever, right? Like you don't really know what's going to make you happy until you're there, right? And yeah, like
and more than that, you don't really know what life's gonna throw at you despite your best efforts. Like, once I thoroughly dispensed with the idea that I actually had any control over my life, most of the pressure went away.
Yeah. Very true, man. Yeah. And to stop even wanting that control, right? And the idea that like I've come to this conclusion quite a bit myself recently is like, even if I could, like even if I did have like whatever, like Aleister Crowley, like what he was after, right? Kind of like real magical power where like anything that I will, I can create in the world, right? Even
what
if I
that guy.
That's our next Crowley cast, right after the
I like that.
after the Jersey Shore, we'll do Crowley cast. But anyways, like that wouldn't actually be helpful, right? Because if you could just like manifest stuff right into the universe, the idea is like you don't actually know what's good for you, right? And like some of these like trials that you have to go through and hurdles that you have to hop over, you might not will them, right? But they do make you they make you who you are, and they are like the test that the universe God, whatever, if you want to say God and their infinite wisdom, whatever the fuck, has decided for you, right? Really, like you should just kind of hop into that wave pool and ride it out, rather than trying to say, oh, well, I know what would be good for me, right? Because the truth is that you don't.
Yeah, and I mean, in a real sense, like, imagine you had kind of this, like, snap your fingers magical power to will your life at any given time exactly how you want it.
Mm-hmm.
How much meaning exactly would it have if it was what you wanted all the time, but you never had to work for it?
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It would kind of feel a little bit pointless, especially since there's no risk involved and nothing to lose.
Yeah, I think even like video games and stuff realize this, right? Like that whole like reward idea, right? Like if you just load it up, oh man, I'm so old with video games. Like what's a new game?
I don't really play new games either. I'm old too. I don't know.
Skyrim.
What's the last game you played? Yeah, Skyrim.
I was going to go with Skyrim, man, which is a 20-year-old game at least.
Oh, God,
Not
don't
that
do
old.
this to me.
It's not that old. It's probably like 10,
It's
15
like 12.
years. Yeah, maybe 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you just like loaded up Skyrim and you had every single item in your inventory and every skill was maxed, right? And it would be boring. Like there would be no
What would be the point? Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Like without the struggle, like that's then the reward is meaningless for sure. Yeah.
And not just the struggle, but like the potential for loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the reasons that love has meaning is because there's always potential to lose one of those people. You know what I mean? That's what makes shared time a gift and stuff like that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, life is valuable because it is short, right?
Yeah.
And your time with your loved ones is valuable because, man, like there's a lot of times like that recently, just like reflecting on my own life where I look back and on just like a certain situation, like having certain friends in a certain place, and like taking that for granted, kind of being like, oh, I have all of these like friends that I hang out with every week. Like I see them every weekend or whatever. And like, that's not permanent, man. Like you really need to enjoy that. Cause I've realized that now, like now that I've moved out of the city, right? Like I don't see my friends as much as I used to. Right. And I think I did kind of take that for granted, being like, oh yeah, I'll see these fuckers next weekend. So, like to live in that moment and really like enjoy that time. Like when I'm in Timmins and I get to hang out with you a bit and we can have some beers and stuff like that. Like now I'm going to be even more appreciative of that. Cause you never know when we won't be able to do that anymore. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You've hit the nail right on the head.
Cool. Let's dig into the next part here. Do you hold on to resentment against like I wrote here the way things are, but maybe that could just be like, yeah, like present conditions or like the universe as it is. Do you hold on to resentment against that? Right. I think that's, like I would say sometimes I do, right? Sometimes I wake up and I go, I think if you go looking for things to be upset about, you will find them. Basically.
Well, but like most emotions, if you're feeling it, sometimes there's a good reason for it.
Yeah, for sure. It can be,
you know what I mean? Like I think anger is kind of a feeling we have when we see things as not being how they should be.
Yeah, or
and sometimes it's justified.
Yeah, or maybe not even anger, just like a feeling of like dissatisfaction.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think in the realm of things that you do have control over, right? Like I'm dissatisfied that my relationship with this person isn't as strong as it used to be. I've like fallen out of touch with them. That's something that I can rectify, right? I'm dissatisfied that capitalism is the dominant global economic system. Not much I can do about that.
Not with that attitude. Start making some I don't know.
Yeah.
Confetti bombs.
Vladimir Lenin.
Just start throwing confetti all over the place and make them pay to clean it up until they run out of money. Right?
But jokes aside, like it's pointless to constantly be like that, right? And it's not like a path to happiness at all. No. I wrote in here like what is the point of being like dissatisfied with things that you can't change? Well, there is no point, right? You're only hurting yourself, basically, right?
Yeah,
for sure. And then this last one here. Well, you can take this one.
Is it really external factors holding you back, or is it merely your own mindset? I I would argue that, like, there's a mix of both here. If you look at our society, it would be hard to argue that there aren't external factors that hold some people in some groups back.
1,000%,
So, I mean, I would say that life is a mix of both of these things, but I mean, for everybody, a huge part of it is definitely knowing what you can change and can't, and just kind of trying to learn to let that go. I think that's probably the most useful tool
yeah.
that Stoicism has to offer.
Yeah. And it kind of goes to that whole thing of like, what does holding you back mean? Right? Like you might think that's
pretty vague.
Yeah, you might think that you're being held back by that challenge, right? But in reality, the challenge is actually what's going to make you stronger, right? That idea, the impediment becomes the way, right?
Yeah.
That we've kind of grappled with over time. I think that I'm starting to have like a better understanding of what that actually means. And, you know, maybe that is like reading through this and studying it more, just like reading the text itself and, you know, having these discussions with you, but then also just like what we're doing here, right? Trying to apply that to your life. And when you do like apply that type of thinking to your life, you do kind of start to realize that the things in the moment maybe that you hated, that you that maybe you even thought that you couldn't bear, right? Like burdens that you thought that you couldn't bear, and your ability to bear them is what's made you into the person who you are today, and maybe like part of your destiny or whatever it was to conquer that.
Not only that, but times that I thought of as some of the hardest in my life, you know what, I look back on some of them now, some of them were like the best times in my life.
For sure, man. Yeah, university for me is a big one of those, right? Like where it was a huge challenge and a lot of stress, but I look back on it fondly now, for sure, right? Yeah, lots of stuff like that, definitely. Do you have anything else on that, or do you want to get to a quote and then we can have a little debate here?
I guess we can move on to the quote. I don't have anything else to say on that. Do you want to say it, or should I?
We only have one quote. You can give it to the people here.
Okay. There is nothing more insufferable than people who boast about their own humility. I am the most humble person. You can ask anybody you want. There is no person more humble than I am. I am the humbliest of the most humble.
I mean, other than me, the true most humble guy.
We'll have a humble off.
Yeah, exactly. That's like from that Weird Al song or something, isn't it? I think that's in Amish Paradise. Yeah.
There's something like that in Amish Paradise, but I can't remember it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of great philosophical kind of timeless wisdom in Amish Paradise. So,
You know what? Weird Al is amazing. Like musically, lyrically, just everything he does is so good.
See, and people say there's no great philosophers anymore, right? Like, where's our Plato? Where's our Aristotle? Where's our Nietzsche, right? Like, oh, well, we have Weird Al, so, you know.
We got Weird Al Yankovic. I love it.
Are we really that bad off? I don't know. There's nothing really like to dig into this quote. I just thought it was kind of fun, so here it is.
I think those in modern times, those philosophical questions kind of get explored in movies a little bit.
Oh, definitely, man. Yeah, for sure. There's like there's like the Matrix and all that, right? So
yeah, that's a really interesting example. There's a lot going on in that story.
Okay, so now we can get into a bit of a debate here. And this goes back to the very first episode of this podcast. And, you know, this is a question that comes up in the literature a lot. As a matter of fact, in the very introduction to my translation of Meditations by Gregory Hayes, you know, he brings up this idea, is Marcus Aurelius really worthy of being called a philosopher, right? And that's something that like I said, we brought up in the very first episode. And I think at this point, after reading all through Meditations and doing quite a bit of research, I think that you and I are probably pretty well equipped to answer that. And this is a debate that not only Devin and I are interested in, but it seems to be that the wider academic community around, ancient Rome and Stoic philosophy, this is something that these people are very interested in as well. Some go even farther than saying that Marcus Aurelius is deserving of being called a philosopher, and some even debate around the idea of, is he the greatest practitioner of Stoicism who ever lived? I don't know about that, but we'll find out, I suppose. So on that point, is Marcus Aurelius worthy of being called a philosopher? So I was trying to think of some kind of rubric, some boxes to check, bars to clear, if you want to be called a philosopher, which is, maybe something that some of the listeners are striving for. It's certainly something that I'm striving for. Maybe Devin is striving for as well. You can disagree with any of these. These are just some ideas that I was able to come up with. Discuss this with my wife Masha a bit as well, who's read quite a bit of philosophy too. So here we go. This is what I was able to come up with. And Devin, feel free to disagree. We can talk about it. So I would say a person is worthy of being called a philosopher if they meet, maybe all three of these criteria. If you found a school of philosophy, this is pretty rare. People like Marx, Nietzsche. Basically, if you have an ism associated with your name, then you're probably worthy of being called a philosopher. I would say another one is challenging the norms of your day. If you're a free-thinking philosopher, chances are that you're going to run up against some friction with the kind of standards of the day, right? And thirdly, this particularly applies to Stoic philosophy. People who are philosophers should live their philosophy. You shouldn't just spend all your time, it kind of goes back to that quote, right? People who boast about their own humility are insufferable, right? Like if you're not living your philosophy and all you're really doing is like talking, then I don't know if you really are a philosopher, or if what you're doing is very valuable. How do you feel about those criteria?
I don't disagree with any of them. Criterion, would I think be the word. I don't disagree with any of them specifically, although I would say as a possible fourth one, what about the expansion of the philosophical canon? Because in my mind, when we were talking about Marcus Aurelius, the big question in my head was this: was he just parroting things that he had heard and read from other Stoics, or did Marcus Aurelius expand Stoicism?
Okay,
and add
interesting.
To it?
Yeah.
Because I would say that's an important factor.
Yeah, even if you don't found your own school of philosophy, if you can contribute like meaningfully to an existing school, then perhaps you could be called a philosopher, right?
Yeah,
I think that's fair. So we can add that one in there. So let's get into some big names here. We talked about this in episode 1. Michael Sugrue, who's done a bunch of lectures on philosophy, kind of describes philosophers as people who spend most of their time philosophizing. I used this as kind of exclusionary towards Marcus Aurelius early on in this podcast.
Yeah, I don't think he would not have spent most of his time philosophizing because he would not have had time for that.
Yeah, exactly. He was spent most of his time emperizing.
Exactly. Administrating would be the word. Well, administrating, but also making war.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't think that is really like the most important thing, right? Do you need to spend most of your time philosophizing? Yeah, for sure. So no. I don't think that necessarily disqualifies him out of the gate anyways. Yeah, Gregory Hayes, who wrote my translation, says that Marcus Aurelius doesn't really clear the bar to be called a philosopher, right? That he was at best a diligent student and practitioner of the philosophy of others. Perhaps a good argument. Almost hard to debate that. But we'll see what we think here. Paul Noyen, hopefully I'm saying his name correctly. He, says he's one of these people who argues that Marcus Aurelius was in fact a philosopher and a great practitioner of Stoicism. Makes a pretty good argument here. Points to the legislative achievements to benefit women, children, slaves. That basically these legislative initiatives, which still we have the good thing is we still have evidence of this, right? Like you can literally go read the laws that Marcus Aurelius put in place as Emperor of Rome, and then kind of work from that to judge, right, if the principles of Stoicism are in play, right? And definitely this is challenging the norms of his day as, wanting to free slaves or creating conditions for slaves to become free as much as possible would have definitely pissed a lot of people off if they owned slaves.
It would seem that way if you examine these specific laws in a vacuum, but if you look at the larger picture, slave stocks were starting to dwindle by the era of Marcus Aurelius, and he was aware of that. And he actually did, in the overall, take steps to try and slow that down.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you look at these laws in a vacuum, yes, that's one thing. But if you look at the larger picture, a lot of these too were kind of adaptations to the needs of the time.
Yeah. And that's something that our next guy, G.R. Stanton, who, is pretty firmly on the other side of this debate, he argues that Marcus Aurelius was unable to unite the roles of emperor and philosopher. That essentially what you're saying, right? That he just is part of a continuum in Roman law, and it's not like what he was doing was that different than his predecessors, right? Kind of just fulfilling what Hadrian and Antoninus had put into place, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he this was part of a larger trend that was an adaptation to the needs of the changing Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm. And his kind of quote or paraphrase from the end of his article, which is way too long, but I did read it. His Stoic philosophy serves as an insulation against the discomfort of the Roman frontiers and the reality of Roman politics. I feel like this is kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe close to your position.
Yeah, so I wrote something down last night while I was taking my notes. A life which was an unfortunate mix of personally tragic and professionally exhaustive demanded of Marcus Aurelius an intellectual and spiritual compromise that demanded an outlet. Meditations was that outlet. He did not write it as a paragon of the virtues he was expounding, but rather as a way of expressing his insecurities about the dichotomy between his ethical beliefs and the political demands of being emperor.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my take on it. That was essentially how I boiled it down last night.
Yeah, pretty good argument. And once I bring in this last guy here, we can kind of go a little bit deeper into that. Stanton also, rather than just focusing merely on like that legal argument and going like straight to the primary documents of Roman law, he does talk about some of like the events of Marcus Aurelius's life, and the Cassius?
Cassius, yeah.
Yeah. So that like the whole rebellion that Marcus Aurelius had to face, and then that being related to succession, how he, chose his son, Commodus, as the next emperor. I think that the standard reading of this situation, like with the rebellion and all of that, is that Marcus did actually act in a very stoic way. We have accounts of a speech that he gave at the time, basically saying that, if the people of Rome really thought that that Cassius would be a better ruler, then he would gladly step down. And essentially that idea of being practical, like the best man should be the person to do the job, and it not being about your ego. That's like a very stoic idea. Stanton kind of reads this in a different way, right? And kind of points out the fact that, Marcus faced this rebellion and then immediately started to put everything in place so that Commodus could become emperor. Like to Stanton shows how unstoic he really was, and that this was basically just like a fear response, and he essentially panicked.
Yeah, I don't know if panic is the word, but I mean, definitely when you're in that position, succession becomes a really important consideration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't just come down to picking a person. You have to create a situation wherein after your death, they will be able to succeed in that position and not just be deposed by somebody who's powerful and able,
Yeah.
Especially in Rome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. It's a read. It's an argument for sure. I'd
say it's extreme, but it's not far off.
Yeah, it's definitely. I like the truth might be as it is in many things, right? Like somewhere in the middle. And I think that the next guy here, Benjamin Hendrickx, read his article as well. I think that he kind of does a good job of finding that middle ground, right? Essentially, finding that Marcus was not the greatest practitioner of Stoicism. I mean, that's kind of like kind of a ridiculous idea. I think anyone would really put, like, even though they're not as well known, but like Seneca, Epictetus, those guys, in terms of like actual, contributing to the philosophy of Stoicism, perhaps they did more.
Hard to compare. Yeah.
Yeah. Marcus's contributions are more in like the application of it, I suppose, which is important. But yeah, not the greatest practitioner of Stoicism. But Hendrickx argues that he was able to unite the roles, much like Hendrick's gin and tonic. That's a strange analogy. That he essentially did apply Stoicism correctly because he didn't try to force it on anybody, right? And the idea that there's this like realistic and moderate approach to applying Stoicism. And there's this obviously like a gap between theory and practice, right? And this ties back with that whole thing of, you're a citizen of the world, right? Like, that's a nice idea. It's something that I believe in, truly that I believe in, right? How can you really apply that when you are the emperor of, a nation, which is obviously by nature going to seek its own ends at the expense of other nations, right? Like there's obviously a gap between theory and practice. That kind of accounts for the fact that it's not a one-to-one that he would take the precepts of Stoicism and then basically like force them down the throat of the Roman people. So that kind of accounts for that gap.
It would never have worked. I don't know if I would have called Roman culture Stoic, particularly.
Yeah, no, not necessarily, right? Yeah. So
in its way, but not in the classic way.
Yeah, so I don't know. Could we maybe find that common ground? Perhaps he wasn't the greatest practitioner of Stoicism, but there is a lot of value in the. To me personally, like I would say that he did really believe this in his heart. He's not. Again, this wasn't meant to be published, so he's really just writing it to himself. Like I do really believe that that Stoicism was. His authentic belief system, and that he did try to apply it as emperor, and just like the realities of the world meant that it's not a perfect one-to-one. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And I place a high degree of value on the idea that he wrote something that's a bit more digestible for the average person,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's been translated correctly, right? So, like,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people have read Marcus Aurelius, but almost nobody's read Epictetus.
Fair enough. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, even though he probably wasn't the greatest practitioner and didn't expand the philosophy a whole lot, um, the fact that he wrote something that people read has a lot of value because if they're going to read Epictetus, there's a good chance that they read Marcus Aurelius first.
Yeah, it's
So
almost like this.
It can be that stepping stone, right?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of this idea of like you have like with science, right? Like let's say physics or whatever. You have these academics who write, these long papers essentially that can only be read by other academics, but they contribute to the field a great deal, as do those science communicators, right? I don't particularly think this person is awesome, but Neil deGrasse Tyson is one example, right?
Yeah, another one is Bill Nye.
Yeah, Bill Nye, Richard Dawkins, these guys who, maybe are they the best scientists? Have they, come up, like, they're not Einstein, right? They didn't discover relativity or whatever the fuck, but their value is that they communicate this and they bring it to the masses, right?
Yeah, exactly. Even if they don't always do it in the most accurate way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. They might have to simplify it a little bit to get it across, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So I would say, with all that in mind, after reading through Meditations, after meditating on it, after discussing it with you, Devin, I would say, yeah, was Marcus Aurelius a philosopher? I think he was. I think that he knew his philosophy inside and out. You can tell by the references, right, all throughout this to Stoic philosophy, Greek philosophy in general, everything from Plato to Chrysippus. And everything, Heraclitus, everything in between, right? That he really did know his philosophy. He attempted to embody his philosophy as much as possible. And to your point, right? Brought philosophy to the masses and like through as like a historical force, right? Like still, 2000 whatever years later, right?
You know philosophy and Stoicism better than me. Would you say that any of the ideas that we've read from Marcus Aurelius were entirely his own, or was everything that we read from somebody else?
As far as I know, it's basically like a distillation or kind of, he really did absorb the philosophy of others and try to live it. Did he come up with his own? No, not really.
For me, then he might be closer to an author than a philosopher.
Okay.
In my mind, but you know what? Honestly, I mean, like that's only if we're splitting hairs, and if we're not splitting hairs, then I'll go straight to calling him a philosopher because, you know what? That's really the thing that he's associated with.
Yeah, and I think like
called the philosopher king.
Yeah, to add another criteria here, like a philosopher is someone who you read that like provokes a lot of thought and conversation.
Well, then by that metric, I'd say he is.
Yeah, for sure. Something that's like very valuable and something that you can read that like expands your worldview and it makes you realize things about like society and about yourself that you wouldn't have otherwise realized. Like that's valuable. And I think that is why we read philosophy, right? Not just to feel smart. And so we can tell people, oh yeah, I've read Plato, and we can feel like kind of like that academic elitism and feel superior to people, right? That's not why I do it personally, right? But
right. Yeah. Yes, of course. That's not why I do it at all.
Anyways, so yeah, that's pretty much the journey, guys. That's pretty much meditations. And this has been a lot of fun. Yeah, Devin, thank you so much for going down this path. Thank you for your dedication to the podcast. This has been really, really enlightening. I really am not exaggerating when I say that this book has changed my life already.
Thank you for choosing to do this with me. I would definitely say that this journey has grown me as well in a lot of different ways. You know, when I look at Stoicism, I don't know if it's the be all end all, but it's definitely this really, really useful tool to have in your toolbox.
For sure. Especially in the modern times, right? Things are a little hectic.
In the hard times of life, it's really good in those times.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you guys for coming along with us. This isn't the last podcast we'll ever do. I don't know. Go on Google, search Jared Poirier, search Devin Kivioya. You'll find more of our stuff. Yeah, well, before we go, want to leave you guys, as always, with a quote, and I'll let Devin do the honors.
Man conquers the world by conquering himself.
And that's from Zeno.